Hi friends, welcome to Handmade, I guess, is the new name that I've decided is going to be the thing. Super cute. And today I want to talk to y'all about mobility, which is my favorite subject in the entire world. And I could go on about it forever. And I'm not talking about the mobility that just kind of makes you more flexible or lets you hit a fancy pose on the Instagrams, which is still super cool. No judgment, no shade. I wish I could do more of those. But before I can do that, we have to really focus on the kind of mobility that actually helps you better access, those types of movement, but also everyday sustainable movement, strength, painlessness, and how to adapt to the real world. Now my animals are playing. Bonnie, let them be. Let them live. Okay, but mobility. To me, mobility isn't just an accessory to training. It's a part of training. It is training. Mobility is kind of a requirement in order to be able to lift properly and lift to build strength. And the more that I've worked with marginalized and hence chronically stressed folks and bodies, the more I've seen how essential it is in order for us to build movement options that our bodies can trust and our nervous system can trust. Because I do think that's really where a lot of us get stuck. We just struggle. We just struggle to trust our bodies because we haven't been able to trust the world outside of us. And the world outside of us has continuously sent subliminal or blatant messaging about how wrong our bodies are or how bad they are, right? Like there's a moral implication to it. Because of that, a lot of what makes sense is to dissociate from our bodies, to disconnect from it, and to kind of run from our bodies. So I think mobility is something that really helps us more intentionally build that connection that I would love for everybody to kind of focus on, not as like their life purpose, but just in general, like as a practice for yourself. So let's get clear on the terms of mobility. Mobility typically means your usable, controllable range of motion, what you can do under your own control with intention, with, your focus. And then within mobility, there are two kinds. You've got passive mobility, where someone or something moves you, right? Like stretching with a band. And then active mobility, where you move yourself into that range with your own strength and control. Let me give you an example. Someone goes into a split, right? Middle split, front split, whatever. There's a difference between being able to like gently fall into a split, using gravity and your own weight to help you get into that range of motion versus think of dancers, cheerleaders, acrobat, gymnasts, people who can lift their actual leg up while they're standing or sitting, whatever, and then actively getting into that all straight leg all the way up to their fucking bodies like they're folding. That is active mobility. So impressive. I mean, I can only dream of getting to that point. And who knows, right? Like it's still something, like it's something that I can aspire to. And I would love to have that intention and control within that range of motion, because you have so much strength that can be built within that. Yeah, so the research backs it up. There's a 2013 review in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, which noted that active mobility training not only improves range of motion, but also increases strength in that range, especially when it's paired with resistance training, which is just strength training or training where you're using a weight or gravity, your body weight, whatever, to build resistance, to build muscle. So when we're talking about mobility, we're not talking about like a warm up or a cool down. We're talking about building intentional and better access to movement options that are strong and safe and sustainable. So why is this so important? It's not just extra credit. Firstly, it improves your joint stability. So when your nervous system trusts a position, it lets you generate strength there. If it doesn't trust that position, you'll either get stiff or compensate somewhere else or increase your risk of injury, which we do not like. We don't want that. That's kind of what we're trying to avoid doing, right? In order to help us sustain. And so if we can prevent that, why not? Number two, it supports better performance in general. Yeah, you literally have more leverage and more control and better force production when your joints are moving efficiently. It's physics. And you can ask any of the folks at Hunt Training, I love mentioning the physics behind body mechanics and how knowing these things and utilizing that can help you lift even more powerfully and safely. And you can't really do that unless your range of motion allows you to get your joints to stack efficiently. A 2017 study in sports medicine found that limited mobility in one joint often leads to overuse or strain in another, which makes sense, right? Like if your knees hurt a lot because you're overworking them, it might be because you have a limited rotation at the hips. I mean, and I'm not saying that this is absolutely the case, but it is a possibility. And for a lot of people, fairly common. Number 3, it helps pain patterns, mobility and movement fear or fear of movement. I've had a lot of clients, and also this happens to me too, where I'm really tentatively holding something in my body that like feels weird. And I know that the way to make it feel better is to increase some of the mobility near that area or in the areas that like I know is connected and attached to that area. And it's just a hesitation, right? But I know that once I work on those spots, the pain will be somewhat alleviated in the other spots. And if not, then I know that perhaps there's something else, something more underlying going on. Because pain often shows up where your body compensates and not necessarily where the root problem is. And it's just a way to, I think, troubleshoot. Like when you're feeling off, when something doesn't feel right in your body, you can make a checklist of what you know of your body and like what you know about bodies in general, test out certain things, see if something helps. And if not, then you can be like, okay, like I've done these things. I've triaged basically before I have to go find a professional who can tell me exactly what's going on, or I can get diagnostics done, so on and so forth. But it's really helpful for you to be able to feel it in yourself, because I often find that like just someone telling you without you fully understanding what is happening, it just makes it really hard to click. Also, something that I want to point out is that mobility, having more range of motion will allow you, like I said, to get into your movements more comfortably. And I think it's important to note that as you work on your mobility and improve that, the ways in which your form looks at first, when you first started lifting, is going to change because your range is different and the range that you can access is different. Hence, you can adjust yourself to better fine tune a movement or an exercise to your body. But anyway. The reason why I really stress this connection with your body is because a lot of your movement is controlled by your nervous system. Not just your muscles and not just your bones, but your nervous system is all connected and decides whether a range of motion is safe or feels safe based on your previous experiences and injuries and trauma or perceived threat. And that's why sometimes, even though a joint can go somewhere, your brain might not let it. And I think that this is especially true for folks with, histories of trauma and dysphoria and chronic hypervigilance and anxiety and depression and disability, all of that. These are things that make you not trust your body. And so you guard yourself a little bit, and your body learns to guard these movements that you were like, I don't know. And it's not just like, oh, people just need to push through, or anything like that, because it's seen in psychology. There was a study done that confirmed that movement, confidence, and perceived safety strongly influences motor control, especially in populations with anxiety, PTSD, or chronic pain. So working on mobility is basically therapy for your nervous system. You're not just lengthening muscles, you're building trust and a relationship with your body and with yourself. So today, lucky you, I am going to share some of my 3 favorite go-to mobility drills. They're not flashy or complicated at all. Very doable at home. And you can do these without standing up even. So there are options around it. And they work, because they teach your body kind of how to feel safer and stronger through foundational movement patterns. Of course, I am not your doctor or your trainer. And even if I am right now, I'm just a YouTube person, okay? So please use your own discretion on your ability to access any sort of movement anywhere. I think it's important for you to take these kind of suggestions or recommendations or things to try and still feel it out in your own body and take note of what you're feeling and how it feels. Play around with it. Anything that I say or that anybody else says is never the end all be all. I think that we get a little too focused on what a professional is saying and not enough about what our own body is saying. So keep that in mind before I go into these exercises. But I do love them, so give them a try and let me know how it feels. So the first one that I want to get into are wall slides. Truly my favorite. A lot of people at the gym have a love-hate relationship with this one. These will help you with shoulder and scapular mobility. You've got a few options. If you want to stand, you can stand with your back flat up against the wall, tuck the ribs a little bit without, rounding the shoulders, and then your arms go up in a goalpost position. And then you're going to slide your arms up slowly, keeping contact with the wall, with the back in particular, and focus on your shoulder blades kind of gliding upwards, but not your traps over firing, okay? And there's a few things to look out for here is making sure that your back stays fully flush and also trying to keep the back of the head up against the wall. A lot of times we crank our heads forward when things get hard. And that actually just makes it more difficult for your, shoulder blade muscles, your rotator cuff muscles to stabilize. So bring them back a little bit. Other things to think about is to keep your wrists and elbows stacked over each other, like they're straight up and down, like perpendicular to the ground. And imagine moving from the elbows, not your hands. It sounds weird, but once you kind of think about it and move that way, you'll see what I'm talking about. Because your hands and your forearms are not the focus, right? They are just kind of there. They're just there to enjoy the ride. And then your upper arms, which is connected to the spot that we're trying to hit, takes the lead of the movement so that you can really control where they're going and how it feels as you're moving through. If you feel your back wanting to arch or your booty is popping, when you're standing up against the wall, you can kind of step your feet a little bit more forward and maybe a tiny little micro bend in the knees. If you're seated, then I like to step my feet a little bit more in front of me and drive into the ground so I can actively engage my lower half. And that will help me from letting my hips relax and pop back if that's a tendency that you have, which a lot of people do. So it's good to look out for. So why does scapular mobility matter? It's because your scapula, your shoulder blades, control your shoulder joint. And if your scapula can't move well, then you're going to feel it. You're probably feeling it right now because if you're a human being, you probably have very limited mobility in the shoulders. So you'll probably feel it in your neck, your rotator cuff muscles, in your overhead strength. You might have a hard time going up and overhead and stacking your arms fully in line with your shoulder joint, straight up and down. That is probably limited shoulder blade mobility. So it's important and it does really help, especially if you're an over the desk, on the computer kind of person. Just take a moment to step aside and do some wall slides real quick. Doesn't have to be super strict. I think that can be really helpful, but if you don't have the time for that, that's okay. Still do a light little few wall slides. Again, priority is not the arms to get against the wall, but the back. You want a constant to focus on. And then you get to see your progression. Your arms will get there eventually if they don't already. Next, we're going to go into our hips. And one of my favorite hip mobility movements are hip C.A.R.s. And C.A.R.s stands for controlled articular rotations. This movement helps with general joint control at the hips and rotational awareness of your hips. Because I do think that a lot of times we're so focused on living our lives kind of straight forward, backward, up and down, but not quite as much towards the in-out area. And so this can really start helping you navigate that, which will help with general movement throughout the day. So ways to do this, I prefer to do it in a tabletop position. So on your hands and knees where your wrists are stacked underneath the shoulders and your knees are stacked underneath the hip joints. What you'll do is then slowly move one leg through its full range with in that hip joint. So you bring the knee up as far up as you can towards your chest, out to the side. And as you slowly bring it behind you, you also rotate it inward. You'll extend it back as far as you can and then bring it back in towards yourself and then reverse it. The goal is to stay controlled, move it slow and to not let your back or your hips cheat. So none of the wibble wobbles, don't let your booty pop. Try not to lean into one side while you're doing the lateral, the outward knee, and only go as far as you can, right? I think, again, with the wall slides, if you have a control, right? Something that acts as your constant, which is the rest of your body, then as you work through these articulations, you'll slowly be able to see progress over time. The more you do it, you'll be able to get more throughout that joint. But right now, what you're doing is learning that you even have that range and that you can go that way. And so why does it matter? C.A.R.s are one of the most effective ways to maintain active joint health because, as I said, you're teaching your brain and your body how to own every part of your hip's available range. And studies have shown, because I love some research, I love some data. Do you say data or data? I don't know. I go with either. But the data, well, anyway, it shows, whatever it is, it shows that repetitive joint articulations like C.A.R.s help preserve your joint capsule integrity. So important because that's the part that actually attaches into the joint. Yeah. It promotes synovial joint fluid movement, which is the lube for your gears. Need that. And it also helps improve proprioception, which is your awareness of the space that you take up around you, basically, or how your body is moving within a space and where your body parts are. I will say for me in particular, like I have a slightly weird hip flexor situation. I think there's something with the ways in which something in my anatomy that makes it hard for me to fully internally and externally rotate my legs to, something like a full split. And a lot of it is because my hips are fairly narrow and small. So I just don't have enough of that range anatomically, like literally. But I was able to better understand that using these hip C.A.R.s and feeling, oh, like some of this is mobility oriented and some of this is literally my bones. And like I said, like that's something that is super helpful for me to understand about myself so that I'm not continuing to work on things that I literally cannot access. And that's okay because that's just my body, right? And lastly, but not least, cervical glides and holds helps with neck mobility, posture, and with your nervous system down regulation. So super important. I like to do these standing or seated. It doesn't really matter either way because you're just focusing on keeping everything below your neck still. And then the head and neck is the part that you're actively moving. So with these, you're going to sit tall, grounding your feet down if you're seated. And if you're standing, trying to ground everything, big belly energy, get that nice bracing. I'll talk about that one day, but sit tall, ground through the booty bones. Imagine the crown of the head is the top of the line of the straight back. And so from here, what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that the head and neck is slightly tilted so that the crown of the head, like I said, is pointing straight up towards the ceiling. And then you're going to glide your chin straight back, not down, but back. And then hold that for about 3 to 5 seconds and release gently and then repeat. I like to imagine like I'm stacking my skull right over my spine. And what we're doing basically is just kind of practicing realigning our head and neck over our shoulders because your cervical spine, your neck, and the posture of your neck, the position of it, highly affects your posture and your balance and even your breathing. And I like to breathe. Very helpful for living and surviving. These are especially helpful if you spend hours on a screen or if you carry a lot of tension in your jaw or your traps and shoulders. Like if you tend to really hike those up and carry your stress there, this will be a game changer, honestly. I do this every day, to be quite honest. Ever since I learned about it, I was like, I'm in. Let's do it. I've been at stoplights when I had a car, just waiting and just gliding, okay? Or I'll just hang out and just start gliding. And, as you get used to this movement, I still want you to think about as you glide, like you're actively elongating through the spine. That way you're not just like kind of crunching it back. You're still wanting to keep the traps down, shoulders down and back, sitting tall. Try not to, especially as you are moving through repetitions, I'd say maybe like 10 to 15 at a time. Avoid the tendency to kind of like slack off as you get closer to the end. Keep each one intentional. I would actually rather that folks do less, but like really well versus a bunch, but like haphazardly. And this is true for any movement, if I'm honest. Do it with intention, do it with focus, and at least with an understanding of how you're moving through things. Because eventually it will become instinctive, instinctual, because practice is going to make permanence. Practice alone doesn't make quote unquote perfection because it only builds permanence. It builds a long-term understanding of something as the way that you've practiced it. So if you don't practice it with good form, you're not going to ever have good form. And that's not that's not me ragging on anyone. I think that is just the truth, right? It's just reality. So in terms of how to apply this, I think it's important everything is important. Okay, so in terms of how to apply these things, don't overhaul your whole routine or your day. Okay. I get it. I get really excited about things and I'm like, all right, this is it. This is all I'm doing now for until the next hyperfixation comes around. But start incorporating it like just into your daily routine, just a little bit. Yeah, like things you can do are go in a little early before your workout, do 5 to 10 minutes of mobility prep, focus on the joints that you are going to be loading that day, or stay a little bit after. If you're trying to do this more throughout the day, then sprinkle it in like in between your meetings, maybe while you're like waiting for dinner or prepping or something, like waiting for your laundry to be done. Or maybe during the meetings if you don't have to be on video. Or you know what, who knows? Maybe it'll be a great break during the meeting for you to do wall slides and guide people through it. Who knows? You could be a hit, building community culture everywhere. Another thing that I think might sound a little bit weird at first, but I think once you put it into practice, you're going to understand why it's helpful during stress spikes or when you have particularly tension heavy days. Do a few mobility things, some cervical glides, wall slides, do it with slow, deep breathing and intention. Honestly, it'll help. It's gonna like down regulate that nervous system a little bit and at least take the edge off in your body, which will then hopefully help take the edge off in your brain, right? Things to remember: quality over quantity, control over the speed, and intention and trust over range at first, right? Like you want to build the trust before trying to increase your range too quickly. Because mobility, in a way, it's a form of body trust. It's a way of saying to yourself and practicing the want for more options and not more limitations to, move through this nightmare chaos hell of a life with more ease. What I want for people to come away with is like looking at the building of strength from a place of like curiosity and of sustainability and of love for themselves, especially for bodies that haven't always felt safe or welcome in traditional movement spaces or really anywhere. This kind of work that we do for ourselves is pretty revolutionary and pretty radical because we're reclaiming a reconnection with our body, which is something that the system kind of takes away from us. Not kind of, but it does. It takes that away from us in a lot of ways without always meaning to take specifically movement from us. But even in these times where we are a lot more aware of the injustices and inequities of the world, we still have to bear a lot of the results of that. So think of your mobility training as nervous system training, as like embodiment work. And it's a long game. It's a long game, strength and like connection and relationship building with yourself. If this resonated with you, or if you learned something new or have something that you want to share, I would love to know. So drop a comment. If there's anything else that y'all would like for me to go deeper on in terms of movement, I could probably go on forever and nerd out about it and have to stop myself. But let me know, because I'm not so good at talking about it unless I'm prompted. Thanks for being here. I hope that this has been helpful for you. Do your mobility drills. Take care of yourself. Don't forget to eat and drink water. Love you. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe and share. If you help support the work, I would greatly appreciate it. And yeah, keep moving, keep asking questions, and keep building that trust with your body. And I will see you next time. Thanks.